Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Beth.
This is a community of people that is a community, and we love film, and we are passionate about the things that we are passionate about, and one of them is the Earth. And so thank you for making An Inconvenient Truth, and then 10 years later now making this film and being here to help us understand it a little bit more.
Well, so it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you all for coming to watch this movie, and Beth, thank you for what you and the Seattle Film Institute does. It's amazing how you serve this community so well, and I look forward to your questions about this.
So do I. So why is it important? Why was it important to visit this again 10 years later?
Well, there have been a lot of changes in the last decade. Two big changes. Number one, the climate-related extreme weather events have become a lot more common and a lot more serious, and you saw some of them as illustrations in this movie. But the second big change is the solutions are here now. And a decade ago, they were visible on the horizon, but you had to rely on the technology experts to give you assurances that they were coming, they're going to be here. Now they're here, and in so many places around this country and the world, they're producing electricity at rates cheaper than what you can get it for from burning fossil fuels, and the rate continues to come down. So soon, that's going to be the case everywhere in the world. And now electric vehicles are getting way more affordable. A new model was just announced a couple of days ago, $35,000, and batteries are now coming down fast in cost, and sustainable agriculture is making some gains, and sustainable forestry, and all these efficiency improvements. I think that we're in the early stages of a global sustainability revolution powered by the digital tools and the Internet of Things, and it has the magnitude of the Industrial Revolution, but the speed of the digital revolution, and it's really changing everything. So we wanted to get that message of hopefulness out there and couple it with the increased sense of urgency that's appropriate, because we're going to win this, but we're not yet winning it fast enough. But we're close to a tipping point beyond which, there was a great economist, the late Rudy Dornbush, once said, things take longer to happen than you think they will, and then they happen much faster than you thought they could. And we've seen that in technology, certainly y'all in the Seattle area have, and Silicon Valley, and we've seen it in politics as well. I tried to put this climate movement in the context of the other great social movements, but just to pick one example, if somebody had told me even 5 years ago that in the year 2017, gay marriage would be legal in all 50 states and would be accepted, honored, and celebrated by 2/3 of the American people, I would have said, I sure hope so, but what are you smoking? And yet, once people got rid of the straw men and really looked at their friends and realized that, what is the deal here? What does it matter who you fall in love with? Then all of a sudden, the change came really quickly, and we honored one another as human beings. Well, this is the same. We're right at that tipping point. And yet we're not quite there yet. And if I may, there's one thing, well, there's several things that you all can do, and maybe we'll get into that, but one thing I want to make sure to mention. This movie opens next Friday, next weekend here in Seattle. And the more people who go to this movie, the better chance we have of building this movement and getting across that tipping point. 100% of the profits from my side, from Jeff Skoll's side, go to the Climate Reality Project to train more climate leaders and activists all around the world. But in today's news and communications environment, the one thing that's most powerful, and you know this, is when you get a recommendation from somebody you know. And so if you have the feeling that this is worthwhile seeing, if you are willing to recommend it to others, the more active this group is in recommending it to your social network contacts and to your friends, word of mouth and on social media, then that can be a huge deal. So if you're willing to do that, I would really appreciate you giving this a boost by recommending it. Thank you.
So I recently rewatched An Inconvenient Truth to sort of be able to compare and contrast, and the first film is largely about your slideshow and the delivery of your slideshow, which you had given thousands of times, but then it really blew up and nationally and internationally with the Academy Award, with the wide release. How was reapproaching the filmmaking different this time, where you're sort of looking more at the effects of the Climate Reality Project, the different governments that you've been working with, and approaching that filmmaking a little bit differently?
Well, it's a different time. More people know the basic facts, but I would guess maybe the main difference between the two films is that the directors this time around, Bonnie Cohen and John Chang, I'm pretty biased, but I think they did an awesome job. They are known for what's called cinema verite, and you know all about this. I had to Google it, and they told me they were going to follow me around for 2 years, and the camera was going to be there all the time, and they warned me, but wow, they really worked incredibly hard. And when they showed me the first rough cut, I was so surprised at all of the scenes where I had completely lost my awareness that they were there. And maybe that's hard to believe for people who haven't been through that experience, but it's just human nature. You just, particularly if the experiences are emotional and you're, absorbed in it, you just, I'd forgotten they were there. Plus they would, they'd be, coming in from different angles and anyway. So that's one of the main differences between the films. And also they felt, and I agreed, that it was time to go a little bit more into the conflict between the rich countries and the poor countries, the developed and developing nations, and to really give positive illustrations of this hopeful development, like in Georgetown, Texas, where you have that conservative Republican Trump supporting mayor, in the reddest city in the reddest county in Texas, but he happens to be a CPA, and right in the heart of oil country, he figured out that all of the citizens can get lower electric bills, and then they notice the air is cleaner. And it's kind of a side benefit that we save the future of humanity. Works for me.
Because it's not a partisan issue. It's a human issue.
Yeah, and it never should have been a partisan issue. And, for 2.5 years after the first movie, An Inconvenient Truth, came out, it became way less of a partisan issue. And the numbers showing support for tackling this went up. John McCain, God bless him, and we're all praying for him after what he's learned. When he was the Republican nominee in 2008, of course he was running during the Great Recession blowing up, and Barack Obama was such an amazing candidate. But when he was the Republican nominee, he was really great on climate, and both parties were totally aligned on this. And then in January of 2009, after Obama was inaugurated, that's when the Koch brothers financed the startup of the Tea Party movement. Not that all of them were just pawns in their game. Some of them were, coming to it for their own reasons. But the Koch brothers and ExxonMobil and other large carbon polluters put lots of money into this new round of the climate denial movement, and they drove a wedge, and made it partisan. And books have been written documenting how they took the playbook from the tobacco companies, you know, years ago when the Surgeon General's report came out linking cigarettes to lung cancer. They hired actors and dressed them up as doctors and put them in front of a camera and a teleprompter to falsely reassure people that there was no health problem, and 100 million people died. And the carbon polluters have hired the same PR agents and used the same playbook. Anyway, we are now finally getting back to the point where the partisanship is beginning to give way a little bit. That Mayor Dale Ross is one example. The mayor of Miami is a Republican, and of course when you got fish from the ocean swimming in your streets on a sunny day, it kind of should wake you up. And in the Congress, they now have this Noah's Ark caucus, which is not only a reference to the biblical deluge, it's also a reference to the fact that they can only join by twos, one Republican, one Democrat, which is a pretty cool idea, actually. And more of them are joining. So I think that we're getting close to a breakthrough.
So how do you deal emotionally and then also professionally with these communities around the world that have been so severely affected by severe climate crises? You know, as going into some very touching scenes, dealing with communities that may not have been on the right side of understanding, you know, climate change, but then a crisis happens. How do you go in there and work with those communities?
Well, I've been at this a long time, and it always affects me very strongly emotionally. You take the citizens of Tacloban in the Philippines, oh my gosh, what they went through. And you see that mayor and the group with him where they had to punch through the ceiling to climb up and save their lives during the flood. And some of them still suffering emotionally from the aftermath. So many people lost family members. It's hard to really get over that easily. And all over the world, as Pope Francis said in the immediate aftermath of Super Typhoon Haiyan, it is the poor that are most affected, and that's true in this country. That's true all over the world. And the next few decades are going to be a test of the courage and character of humanity. And that may not, I don't know how that sounds, but it's true. We're going to have to get through this because some of the consequences have been kind of made inevitable now, but a lot of them we can still avoid. So how we kind of come to the realization that some of this we're just going to have to do our best to adapt to and deal with, and of course the rich countries are going to have to, as much as we can find the political will to do so, help the poor countries. But job number one is preventing the complete and total destruction of human civilization, which could occur if we were not grabbing hold of this. Good news, though, as the movie tries to make really clear, is we are making progress. We are going to win this. The remaining question is how fast we'll win it, because more damage is being done every day. And you know, Trump, when he pulled out of the Paris Agreement, I was really worried that other countries would use that as an excuse to pull out too, but I was so gratified when so many, the whole rest of the world redoubled their commitment to staying in the Paris Agreement, you know. Wow. And you know, somebody called it the Trump boomerang effect. There's a law of physics that sometimes works in politics. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. It was almost like the whole rest of the world was saying, well, we'll show you, Donald Trump. And here in this country, by the way, your governor, Jay Inslee, is a real hero on this. He's done such a great job. And matter of fact, he's in another theater here, and I'm going to see him shortly. and I was with Governor Jerry Brown in California Tuesday for the red carpet premiere. He signed that historic legislation and came down to Los Angeles for the red carpet. He's a great friend. And Governor Cuomo in New York. So many governors, so many mayors, so many business leaders have really stepped up to fill the gap. And it now looks like the U.S. Has a real good chance of meeting the commitments under the Paris Agreement, regardless of what Trump does. And an important detail a lot of people aren't aware of, the way the agreement was written, and this is not entirely a coincidence, the first date on which it is legally possible for the U.S. to actually effectuate the withdrawal is the day after the next presidential election in 2020. And
thank you.
And if there is a new president, excuse me, if not before, now there may be some people who are still supporting Trump here. I don't want to step on your toes, but on this issue, he's been really bad, and to put it mildly. But a new president can just give 30 days notice, and the U.S. is back in. So, and anyway.
So that sort of leads me to, you know, in what you've talked about in the films is working person to person and city to city and getting people involved on the grassroots level with, you know, Climate Reality Leadership Project and the things that grew out of An Inconvenient Truth.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about getting different communities and different organizations involved and the Climate Reality Leadership Project?
Well, I was so happy a month ago when the Climate Reality Project had a training program in the Seattle area in Bellevue. It was great. Some of y'all were there. Thank you, thank you. That was really a fantastic training program, and we're almost 13,000 trainees who've gone through this. The last one, I'll just tell you that. Well, first of all, one of the people who went through my second training in Nashville in 2007 was Christiana Figueres, who ended up being the chief of the whole climate negotiation in Paris. And there's so many of them that have gone on to start businesses in the clean tech space, to the environment minister, one of them in Australia is a train. I mean, I could give you lots of examples, but I just want to single out one. In the training before Seattle, I did a training a few months ago in Denver, and there one person who came for the 3-day training was an 11-year-old girl, and I thought, you know, isn't this too young? And you know, I was thinking maybe I should be like the amusement park person. You have to be taller than this bar to get on this ride. But I saw her. She was taking notes really diligently all through the 3 days. 2 weeks later, I clicked on a video that was going viral on social media, and there she was, this same 11-year-old girl. Her Republican congressman in Colorado was having a town hall meeting, and she was standing up with a microphone just giving him hell about the climate. And I thought, you go, girl. And she ended by, she invited him to come to her science class the following week, where she was giving the entire slideshow to the school, and he was busy that day. But I think she had an impact on him.
So what can we do? What can we do as individuals? What can we do as business owners? What can we do as community leaders?
Yeah.
How do we get involved?
Well, thank you for asking. First of all, learn about it. Thank you for seeing the film. I already mentioned how important it is to recommend it to others. If we can gain momentum around the country and around the world, this is opening around the world. Next weekend, August 4th, 5th, 6th, it's opening here in Seattle. And it really matters how many people go to see it. And I'm going to Berlin next week for the opening there, and London for the premiere there, and then Tokyo and Singapore. It's going to open all over the world like the first movie did. But the biggest audiences will be here in the U.S., and the more people who see it, the better. Also, there's a book of the same title, and it's available, I'm told, out
In the lobby.
in the lobby. The Book Larder, is that the name of the group? Thank you, Book Larder. And 100% of the profits from the book go to train climate activists also. So the first thing is learn about it, because knowledge is power, and the more you learn about it, the more confident you will feel in talking to people about it. And the number one challenge is to use your voice, win the conversations on climate. Number two, use your vote, and make sure that you really get others to vote in a pro-climate way. And when candidates come and ask you for your vote, let them know this issue is important to you. Contact your office holders. You've got a lot of great climate champions here in Seattle and the state of Washington, but there are a few that aren't on side yet, and you ought to just kind of wear them out if you can. Just make sure that as a citizen you're active and go to the town hall meetings. The more prominent you make the issue, the more they take note of that. Use your choices in life. When you insist on a climate-friendly alternative in a store, that not only helps you walk the walk, it sends a message to business, and a lot of businesses are really taking a very active role now, a leadership role, and I hope that more will. But when they feel pressure from consumers and from their employees, and then, you know, consider asking the places where you live and the places where you work and your social clubs to consider going 100% renewable. It's not just Georgetown, Texas. There are a lot of cities that are. The president said in his speech that he was the president from Pittsburgh, not Paris, and the very next day the mayor of Pittsburgh said, well, we're going 100% renewable. We're staying in Paris. And Atlanta just announced that it's going 100%. People been to it. I've been to Atlanta. If Atlanta can do it, any city can do it.
Is this a winnable fight?
It definitely is a winnable fight, absolutely. And we are close to getting over that political tipping point where we will win it. The addition of really cost-effective batteries to solar and wind are going to revolutionize the energy sector. Every major automobile manufacturer is now following Tesla and beginning to introduce electric vehicles. Next year, they're going to be all over the place. Did I mention what India is doing? No. Since the Paris Agreement, India just announced 2 months ago that within only 13 years, 100% of all their cars and trucks will have to be electric vehicles. That's pretty amazing. And you know, both France and the United Kingdom have announced that same goal for 10 years later, and I'm talking to people over there saying, you mean India's going to beat you by 10 years? And this, I mean, come on. Yes, we can win this, and we will win this. But it's a daunting challenge, and we can't underestimate how difficult it is, because more than 80% still, about 81% of all the world's energy still comes from dirty fossil fuels. And, you know, that's the legacy of the Industrial Revolution. But as a Saudi Arabian oil minister said decades ago, the Stone Age didn't end because of a shortage of stones. And it ended because something better came along. And we've got enough oil and coal and gas to incinerate the entire damn planet. But the fossil fuel age will end because something better has come along. But they are definitely, not all of them, but a lot of them, are using their legacy political and economic power, their lobbying and their campaign contributions to bend the politicians to their will. And as I said in this film, we've got to deal with the democracy crisis. And the bar to clear for the public's voice to be heard is higher now, but we can clear it. Just because it's a little harder now, all that means is we've got to work harder as citizens to make our democracy work the way our founders intended it to work. And now that we have the internet and social media and the ability to organize, and you know, a big change is underway now. We've got the wind at our backs, no pun intended, and we have the ability to push this over that tipping point. But it's going to require an act of will and courage and character with passion and commitment on the part of average citizens. I grew up in the South with Pam and Kenneth Eakes in Tennessee when the Civil Rights Movement was gaining momentum, and they can tell you, and I'll tell you, the resistance to civil rights in the South was way more ferocious than the resistance to this climate movement. But when people came to realize that it was really a question of right versus wrong, then the change came quickly, and we passed those laws. And the same thing is true here, but we have got to get involved as citizens and let the elected officials and candidates know that we are serious about it. If they're on our side, we'll help them. But if somebody's not on side, just tell them. I've been on the receiving end of this, so I tell you what works. Just tell them that if they don't change, you will not rest until you convince every single person you know to defeat them and get them the hell out of elected office.
Mr. Vice President, thank you. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.